Welcome to everyone. Nice full house and great assortment of people from all ranges of work. Please feel free to keep entering in chat information. Love to learn more about you, what you need to know today so that you have a good experience. And a little introduction of myself. My name is Connie Carlson, and I am with the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships. I am the statewide food systems, sustainable ag and food systems co-director. So with that, just a brief introduction of the Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships. We are a statewide.
From what I understand, yours was an abstention, not a no vote.
And make sure that everyone's
you
muted.
three win again anyway, so I don't see the difference.
And just make sure that you're muted as you come in. So Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships, we are a statewide extension program in Greater Minnesota with the resources at the university. Hopefully you can, thank you, Anna. I'm working on mutes here. And this platform that we are hosting today is a platform that we generally host every January, February. It's traditionally been used as a way for us to connect with growers and people in the food system who want to learn about new subjects or brush up on some topics, everything from hazelnuts and deep winter greenhouses to grazing and other subjects. With the advent of COVID, we felt that it was important to bring this platform back as a way for our food system community to rapidly respond and get the information, connect with the experts, and learn what they need to do to adapt and be resilient in this time of great change. So tonight's plan, or I should say today, because it's afternoon and the sun is still shining. And by the way, thank you for everyone who's joining us on a day like this, where sometimes it's just nice to be outside. So we are grateful for your presence. So today we'll have an opportunity. You can put in any questions in the chat as we go. I'll be monitoring that chat, and we have a full team of people who will also be doing the same. So we're really looking at this as an opportunity for dialogue to happen and for you to talk with the experts around these subjects and get your questions answered. Again, this session will be recorded and we will post it to the Local Foods College website, so you will be able to access it and share it with anyone else you think may need to learn from what we learned today. And as always, thank you for your patience with technology. I think we're all getting better and better at this, but you just never know. So some things come up and we just have to deal with them. And this session we're planning on it lasting about 90 minutes with plenty of time for dialogue. So with that, I am pleased to hand over the screen to Sammy Burrington. She's a registered dietitian for the Minnesota Department of Education, and she's been with the department for 8 years, working in different roles, including monitoring the school nutrition program, certifying compliance with school menus, working on food distribution programs, and most recently implementing farm to school efforts. And with, I know that I didn't mention this in the beginning, but again, this is our focus today is farm to school, and how people are and what we are doing to adjust in this time. And we have a full slate of experts who have good information for us to learn from. So with that, thank you, Sammy and your team, and I'm going to stop my share and let you take over.
All right, thank you, Connie, and others who helped bring us all together today. And thank you everyone for joining our Farm to School discussion too. It's really a learning and sharing opportunity for all of us. And what I'm going to do here is share my screen. Let's see if it works. So this is our Farm to School Leadership Team webpage, which is housed on Minnesota Extension's website. And for those of you new or unfamiliar, the Farm to School Leadership Team is a group made up of 11 different organizations, including state agencies and nonprofit partners. You can see on this list who serves on our team currently. And we all work through partnerships across Minnesota to build farm to school initiatives that help kids eat healthy, support nearby farmers, foster economic vitality, and strengthen our communities that we live in. The group strives to maximize our resources, ideas, and impact of Minnesota's many farm to school efforts that we've seen across the state. As a team, we last met in early April, where we began to discuss the needs of our partners during this COVID-19 pandemic. And now we can collaboratively live out our team's mission, again, to help students eat healthy, support our farmers, foster that economic vitality, and then strengthen our communities. And so here we are today. We really are in this together and here to learn from each other. No one of us have to do this alone. And as our governor likes to say, we are one Minnesota. And this is our opportunity to be innovative and creative. So today we have a great lineup and agenda. I'm going to share with you. Let's see if it works. So here is what our agenda includes. We've already gone through an introduction and background. We'll look at our school level farm to school resources from Grace Brogan at Renewing the Countryside. Deb Lukanen from the Minnesota Department of Education will provide a school nutrition program update. And then my colleagues at the Department of Agriculture, Sue Knott, and first we have Sadie Gannett from the Department of Health sharing a SHIP or Statewide Health Improvement Partnership update. And then MDA, or those from the Department of Agriculture, Sue Knott and Helen Schnoes will provide some statewide farm to school resources available. And then we can jump into a discussion and Q&A. So first up, we have Grace Brogan from Renewing the Countryside. She currently organizes Renewing the Countryside's community-based food system programming. She facilitates the development strategy and supports the organization's outreach. She holds an MS in sustainable food systems and writing and has spent over a decade in the nonprofit and sustainable agriculture sectors. So Grace, I think I will stop sharing my screen and you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Sammy. As Sammy mentioned, I'll share a little bit about some resources that are available, and I've got colleagues on the call now, like Kirsten, Annalisa, and Natalie, who can jump in as needed. But I thought because we do have a diverse audience, I could give a little background on farm to school and Renewing the Countryside's approach to farm to school as we were, when this crisis hit, about 2/3 of the way through a number of farm to school workshops across greater Minnesota. I will share my screen. Please let me know if there are any issues with it. Okay. So farm to school and early care. I'll speak to some of these kind of basic things that we always want to remember, and then touch on those particular things around COVID-19 that will want to carry those basic rules through. Goals through all of our work are around building skills and relationships. And today I'll particularly talk around garden best practices and leveraging technology, given where we are with COVID-19. I have included a little chart here, if you can see it, in the lower left that the National Farm to School Network developed that talks about the core elements of farm to school. Might be review for some of you, but it's always helpful to remember when we're talking about being in this together, one Minnesota, that there are several different components and there's no one right way to do farm to school. Whether you're serving one local food meal a month or trying to incorporate it in every meal during regular times and trying to figure out what that looks like during COVID. All of the connections around education, purchasing local food, and school gardens are making those community connections, educating students, and getting healthy local food to them as well. So as far as renewing the countryside's farm to school events, for over 12 years, we've been connecting community members and creating a shared understanding of the benefits of farm to school. We've held over 30 events over that time, many of them in greater Minnesota, some of them as well in the metro, using networking as a key component, as well as sharing new resources and best practices. And that coming together and understanding, even though there are maybe farmers in the room, there may be school administration in the room, what the real basic shared goals are, why we are in this together, that we care about the health and wellness of our landscapes, of our students. That often is a really important base in further connection and further learning about how to incorporate farm to school. So that's something I thought we could just keep in mind as we think about what this might look like during COVID. And on top of that, I think it's important to keep in mind the benefits that are not only impacting and rippling across the public health, the schools, the children and their families, but also the local economies when farmers are able to have diverse income streams. I share here just a quote from John Peterson of Ferndale Market about how one of the networking events connected him with many of the customers he still serves today. Again, we were able to hold a number of these events so far here between January and February and early March. Again, about connecting, working with partners, building the agendas around local needs. Extension and SHIP are always key partners. I talk about that a little bit more right here, and I'll just kind of keep moving forward. Heavy text is never good in slideshows, but I do want to point out this second half of who's invited. Whether it's hosting a farm to school workshop or thinking, what does this look like now if you've already launched it or are looking at launching it, or once the real school nutrition staff are facing so much right now in the transition to meet the needs of getting meals to students. But through that, realizing that there are connections here that can be made to support farm to school, whether it was something that was already happening at your school, you're still considering. When you're ready, when it feels like you can, people to engage include school staff and administration, FACS teachers, interested parents, wellness committee members, local producers of all kinds, existing community partners, like I mentioned, Extension, SHIP, and others, and community institutions who are already working on this, who might be helpful partners as you move forward. To get to the kind of two major components I mentioned I'll be talking about as relevant right now to COVID-19, I want to shine a light on school and community gardens right now, and feel free to chime in, those partners who are on the phone as well. A few best practices to keep in mind for those school and community gardens during this time are to postpone events that would mean there were large gatherings of people, to stagger visitor time, to maintain social distancing and mask recommendations, listening to public health and CDC recommendations, hand washing and disinfecting surfaces and tools, considering alternative planting options if there may be limited access depending on what might be happening, and finding other ways to stay engaged and connected. We will be having a deeper dive here on May 7th on this topic, and we'll be able to share this link with you to register for that webinar. But I'm going to pause here in case any of the partners on school gardens would like to speak to anything in particular.
I'll jump in case anyone's not reading the chat. We do have a comment from someone, Renee, who would love to know who is listening, who is working for districts who are allowing school gardens to be accessed and utilized. She's hoping to put together a list. She's currently in discussions with the Duluth district. So if you want to share your information in the chat and keep that rolling, feel free.
Hi, this is Kirsten. I'm going to be doing this workshop with Renewing the Countryside on May 7th. I think these are the top ones. And yes, the MDA, I saw that popped up in the chat too. The MDA put out some good guidelines. I'm going to say that there's a couple things to keep in mind. One is probably not going to plant items that you think people will pick right away. And so that was one thing that we were trying to push for with St. Paul Public Schools. The other one is maybe this is a good year to do cover crops or do annual pollinators. It's going to be decided by on your school, but also your school grounds folks are going to have a lot of words with that. So I would say for sure connect with them. They are responsible for health and welfare on school property. So if you're not already part of that department, make sure you contact someone there. Hopefully you already have a relationship there. I think I'm going to end there. There's a lot more we could go into, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Kirsten or additions from Natalie or Annalisa, who were also working on some of these concepts? I will also put the registration link in the chat. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can just say really quickly, Annalisa and I have been working on kind of a template for fruit and vegetable farms to identify risks throughout their operations and create a plan based on that. So a little bit more in depth than the kind of basic guidelines. And we're in the process of adapting that for community gardens as well and school gardens. And that should be published by the end of the week. So we'll make sure to share that, and that'll be part of this conversation on May 7th as well.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Kirsten. I'm not currently looking at the chat, just the way my screen share works. So if there are any other garden questions we want to have now, I'll pause again.
I also would say, I don't know if any of the school districts are hosting community gardens. One thing I found, and a lot of kudos to St. Paul, which I work with, but that they have a lot of things that they're working on right now, the facility folks. And so even just helping to raise this as an issue, but also trying to help them out in thinking that through. And so, yeah, Natalie has been talking with Natalie and Annalisa about kind of recommendations for COVID and how to have garden infrastructure that supports safe gardening, and then also personal best practices as well. So there's a whole list of that for those things. One thing that I appreciated when I was participating in Minneapolis Public Schools school garden webinar was the idea of having a sign-in sheet, but a way of doing that in a way that doesn't share germs. I guess going back to the idea is that we need to be able to trace, and so having some accountability back at the garden site. Lastly, when we talk about infrastructure, it is like having a hand washing station available right away. I think, again, going back to what Grace had said about thinking of different planting options, what might not need a lot of care would be really ideal. Or how to limit where people are going to garden. So some school gardens are done like big collective garden, and people will come in together as a project, or they'll get assigned per week. Maybe it makes sense in this case to do it a bed by household if that's what we want to do. It depends again where that garden is. If you think there's going to be a lot of visitors and a lot of people walking in and picking, that might not be the best option in that case. yeah, there's just a lot of considerations, isn't there? And so I was just going to reach out to Renee to say that she can give me a call anytime. But that goes for anybody. So I'm happy to share, but I do want to say that being proactive and connecting with your facilities folks is so, so important.
Thank you, Kirsten. Again, we'll do a deeper dive here soon on May 7th. I'll put that link in the chat to register for that as well. So for now, moving on to another topic within Farm to School during COVID. We're in this together. It might be looking really different right now. One thing that we have been working with the communities, we've been hosting these Farm to School workshops in, as well as a few others, is using technology to promote connection. And as we're all feeling in many ways, as we're on Zoom right now, there is a lot of ways we can leverage that technology right now when we can't be together in person. But even so, technology can help promote connection in strange times like this and in more regular times. And what I'm going to talk about here really briefly is farmers market aggregation, or a lean food hub model that a number of partners listed here at the bottom. Farmers Market Hub is what we're calling it. Minnesota Farmers Market Association and NISA have been other major partners in this, and each of the communities we've been working in across the state to use online sales platforms built around local food systems to help aggregate food from multiple farms around existing farmers markets, so that we can build efficiencies, ease of communication and purchases for community institutions like schools, early cares, and all other types of community institutions that might be interested in leveraging technology to increase their purchasing of local foods. So just to say that this was already in the works. We've been working on it with these partners and others for several years now, working at the Kink, building the pilot and kind of information infrastructure to help other communities understand how they might be able to do this. And thinking creatively, whether it's through this platform or others, about how you can use technology to promote connection around farm to school when you're ready and able to think about it. In this case, we're using a platform called Local Line with this Farmers Market Hub. Here are a couple examples of what it looks like on the back end, working with schools and community institutions, as well as farmers market vendors to be building those connections, creating some more ease in purchasing, aggregating, and distributing. There are a number of other resources about that project elsewhere. We recently held a webinar we could also share the recording of. But just to say, thinking creatively about how we can continue to explore local food purchasing, connecting with farmers and partners, and vice versa with school districts in these strange times, navigating how we can continue to connect and move forward when we do have a lot of these shared goals and we want to keep moving it forward right here at the beginning of the growing season. Just a couple more things I'm sharing here. The National Farm to School Network has compiled a list of resources from resources for schools to farmers on community gardens to funding strategies that you might be interested in. I put the link here and we can pop that in the chat as well. I've also included the link again here for that upcoming school and community garden webinar we'll be hosting. I know that covered a lot of information. If there are any questions, please let us know. Otherwise, I know we have a lot of other things to touch on.
Any additional questions for Grace? All right.
All right. Next, I will introduce Deb Lukanen. She joins us to share the changes happening in school meals. She's the supervisor for the school nutrition program at the Minnesota Department of Education and oversees over 670 different sponsors who provide school lunch, breakfast, and snack meals to students in Minnesota at more than 2,000 school sites. Deb has worked with MDE in school nutrition for the past 32 years. So Deb, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Sammy. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm going to share my screen. And let me know if it's working. Let's see. Do you see it?
Not yet.
Okay. Nothing yet?
Not yet.
Did you pick your application?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I picked my application. Let's see. Anything
There
yet?
you go.
Oh, except that's not what I want to show you. This is what I wanted to show you. Is it working now?
Yes, it is. It looks beautiful.
Okay, and then Siri in the background is saying, I'm not sure. All right, thank you, everybody. I am going to kind of give you a little bit of a different presentation today, and I'm going to give you a very quick overview of kind of what's happening in the school realm right now, and in relative to all the COVID-19 and the distance learning that's taking place. Actually, I can do a nice slide here. There we go. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, we have about 670 school food authorities. That's what we call them, SFAs. They're actually sponsors of our National School Lunch and Breakfast Program. They could include public schools, charter schools, private schools, residential childcare facilities, which could include incarceration facilities. It could include mental health or chemical dependency, long-term treatment facilities. So quite a few different types of sponsors of the National School Lunch Program. From those 670 SFAs, we have over 2,000 school sites. The programs that our Department of Education administers includes the National School Lunch Program, the School Breakfast Program, Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, and you can see we love our acronyms here. This is a typo, Special Milk Programs, the Summer Food Service Program, or SFSP, and then the Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP. Most of our work focuses on monitoring program compliance, and we have a team of about 15 nutritionists that focus on the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program, and another maybe 10 or 12 that focus on the daycare centers, the daycare family homes, and adult care food programs. The rest of our time is spent providing technical assistance and support, as well as developing educational materials, maintaining our website, and providing any kind of written or webinar documents. We do have every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we have a webinar that starts in August and goes until the end of May. So we've got regular contact with our 670 school food authorities. Here is currently, right now, all of the red teardrops or the red dots is where we are providing meal service during distance learning. The blue are programs that are called at risk, and those are usually evening meals. So the red dots provide at least provide either 1 or 2 meals or snacks. Usually breakfast and lunch are offered. Some schools will do a lunch and a snack, and it's Minnesota is an independent state. Our public school districts are called ISDs, Independent School District, for a reason. So that's why we have so many independent sponsors, 670 providing meal service. And when the governor called for a distance learning, it kind of tipped everybody else in the school nutrition program on its ear a little bit. We had to very, very quickly, with very minimal notice, transition from a national school lunch program to the summer food service program. And I'm including some, let me see, is there a way to, Sammy, to block the pictures on the side? Or maybe that's just on my, never mind, I got it. Okay, so if you wanted to block the pictures of the presenters, you could do that. So I'm also including a lot of the photos that schools have sent me over the last couple of weeks, so you can kind of get an idea of how school food service has changed and some of the challenges that we're having with the distance learning. So for the first thing is that menu planning. There's a different meal pattern for the National School Lunch Program versus the summer food service program. The SFSP program is much more relaxed. It is smaller. It could be smaller portion sizes. It is less required components. The National School Lunch Program is very robust. Both programs have meat, milk, fruit, vegetable, breads, but the National School Lunch Program just has a lot more requirements, and the SFSP program is a little bit more, has a little bit more flexibility. The reason that we needed to transition from NSLP to SFSP was partly USDA guidance and directives that it is easier to operate an SFSP under challenging circumstances. And COVID-19 clearly offered challenging circumstances. One of the other things is distance learning, and the kids weren't coming to school sites. So what we needed to do was transfer everybody, all 670 of those sponsors, for the most part, over to SFSP. The age groups are also different. With the National School Lunch Program, we're really talking about pre-K, 4 or 5 years old, 5-year-old up to 18 or 19-year-old. In the SFSP, it is anybody from 0 to 18 years of age. The menus look different for SFSP. We had to transition from a traditional menu to more of a grab and go type menu for the initial weeks of the summer food service program. And now we're actually transitioning back to a more traditional menu. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. The first few weeks, it was very busy trying to get to develop menus that could be served from buses, menus that could be served from the parking lot, menus that could be delivered to homes in boxes, and how could they be packaged appropriately and maintain temperature and other sanitation controls. But now what we're seeing as the distance learning continues is that all of the kitchens had freezers full and storerooms full of food inventories, and they really need to start using that up before the school year ends. And so now we have been working with the Department of Health to offer frozen foods in meal bags or in meal boxes, along with the ingredient list and along with the cooking instructions. So the menu planning was huge, and it followed along with the various ways of distributing meals. And I think, let me see if I have one on the next page too. Here's a great picture of a couple of different school districts, and this one I think is in St. Paul, and they're packing their meals up in the wee hours of their morning and loading up the trucks, and then the trucks go to various stops throughout the district. Here's another picture of all of the individually packed bags. These are, I think they are breakfast bags, and these are, the students can come up and they can be given one breakfast, one meal, and schools are finding ways to bundle the meals also. Here's some other pictures. Sometimes it's loaded onto activity buses, and the buses are going to the different bus stops on a normal bus route. Oftentimes they're taking the educational classroom material also with them. We have had to employ lots of paras, lots of bus drivers, administrative staff to help try and package the meals. What schools have found after about the first week or two of delivery is that it makes a little bit more sense to pack a 5-day box for every student. And Minneapolis has, this is Minneapolis's example, they've got some really nice guidelines. There are still a lot of other people who are doing daily distribution of meals of either breakfast or lunch, but a lot of schools are going and delivering a 5-day meal box for the students. And these are just some pictures of the different ways. This picture was our very first week of delivery or distribution, and I put that in there only because with social distancing, we've been learning ways of being able to accommodate those social distancing parameters. And same thing here. There's no 6 feet between each person, maybe between this one and the pineapple, but this is an example of where kids and families come right up to the entryways of the schools. Here's another one. This is in Warba. It's a little charter school up in that, and the families drive up with their cars and try and make that 6 feet social distancing. But there's a lot of different ways of distributing the meals for the kids. Up in Red Lake, they actually drive to the families' homes. So a lot of different ways that meals are distributed and ways to keep the kids engaged. I'm going to scroll back to one of my slides here. So that just kind of covers some of the different ways that meals are being distributed. The procurement has been quite interesting too, because when we started initially on mostly grab and go, that kind of affected product availability. And we saw a run on cardboard boxes. We saw a run on baggage, bagging materials. And we saw a run on the pre-packed or pre-wrapped items, and that could be fresh fruits and vegetables, it could be sandwiches, it could be just kind of a lot of those things that were either shelf stable or just needed to be put in the refrigerator. And product availability has kind of been up and down. USDA has allowed a lot of waivers that they had said that if the schools aren't able to get some products, that they would give a waiver to tide them over, still provide them reimbursement. What we've seen in Minnesota is kind of a up and down availability of fluid milk. So initially there was some real issues with that. And now as schools are packing large boxes, they're not really needing the half pints as much as they are asking us, is it okay if we put in a half gallon? USDA has also offered some flexibility on the, it's called offer versus serve, and the parents or the student can say, you know what, we don't drink a lot of milk in our family, we choose to refuse some, all, or part of it. The food service staff has, school food service staff were deemed essential, and they were required to report to work. And we are finding that as the COVID-19 continues, that there are more efficiencies being developed within food preparation. There also are, at some schools, less meals being served, and at other schools, more meals being served than in a traditional school setting. So the staffing, again, has been up and down. But what is really critical, and what everybody agrees with, is that the time that school food service directors and staff are spending during this challenging distance learning is huge. They are working nonstop 80-hour work weeks very, very frequently. So when I call them or contact them about something other than COVID, they'll flat out tell me, I don't have time to get that information to you, or I don't have time, or I wasn't able to read the memos, or I wasn't able to watch the webinars, because they are so all consumed with feeding the kids. And that was directly a mandate from our governor. And the governor says, schools, you will do everything that you can to ensure that students are provided meals. So again, these are just some of the pictures. We've got great pictures from all over the state, and I'm just thrilled to be able to share them with you today.
Deb?
Yep.
We have a question about reimbursement rates. Are reimbursement rates the same for SFSP meals as NSLP meals?
Nope, it's a little bit more, but it's a little bit misleading because so you think, oh, well, you know, they're getting, and I can't really, I'm thinking that the NSLP meals, their reimbursement rate is a little bit more than $3, you know, and maybe Sammy in the meantime can look it up while I'm talking, but it's a SFS, or summer food service meals are a little bit more. But we are finding that this is really taking distance learning and preparing meals and distributing meals this way is taking a huge, huge financial hit on all of our food service operations. One of the reasons is because they are oftentimes having to pay overtime because they need to come in on Sundays. The distribution and the food preparation schedules are so different that there's overtime, there's double time, there's hazard pay, there's required pay. And then on the other hand, you have some schools that are laying off people. So it's been a very, very big mix of things. And with the summer food service program, there is no state reimbursement. These are all federal programs. So we are working on that piece to try and get some additional reimbursement, but food service programs are taking a hit. These are just some really cool things that the Tracy Area School has been dropping in the boxes or the meals, and lots of things like that. Oh, I guess that was the end of my presentation. So I'm happy to entertain any questions.
We have another question about whether or not you foresee increasing numbers of students served or meals served, and would this help with reimbursement rates?
You know, it's different. We are seeing St. Paul just kind of got tipped over on its heels the first couple of weeks. They were preparing more meals than they had truly expected. I had a conversation with the food service director in Lewiston, Altura, which is a smaller district in southern Minnesota, and she said we started off serving 200 meals a day, and now she is serving 1,000 meals a day. Now you have to remember with the SFSP, it's anybody can come to the meal distribution sites as long as they're from 0 to 18 years of age. And there are some of the distribution sites are very pointedly designated to address school age children, but some of them are open sites where it's open to the whole community. The transportation costs are terrific during this type of a meal service. So like I had said, I think that all schools are going to be experiencing a huge, huge financial hit. Other questions?
I'm not seeing any more.
Okay, I'll stay on and you can chat them in and we can talk about them later.
And Deb, I did share both the summer or SFSP reimbursement rates compared to the National School Lunch, as there are some varying factors in those rates. So if anybody has more questions on those rates, they can contact us too, right?
Great, perfect.
Okay. All right, thank you, Deb.
You're welcome.
Yeah, next we will invite Sadie to share updates on the Statewide Health Improvement Partnership, otherwise known as SHIP. Sadie works for the Minnesota Department of Health as the Food System Coordinator within the Office of Statewide Health Improvement Initiatives. She holds a Master's of Public Health and a Master's of Urban and Regional Planning with a focus on food systems. In addition to working in both state and local government, she has over a decade of experience working in the nonprofit sector as a direct service provider and researcher. So over to you, Sadie.
Thank you, Sammy. Everybody hear me? Okay.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I'm also going to attempt to share my screen. So Here we go. All right, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so from who's on the call, I'm sure most of you are quite familiar with SHIP. So SHIP stands for the Statewide Health Improvement Partnership, and just a little background, it began back in 2008. They actually secured legislative funding, which gets distributed across the whole state to address the primary areas of active living, healthy eating, and commercial tobacco use. I'm in the healthy eating side. So as you can see by the map here, it really spans the whole state. And in 2019, it looks like we had 24 SHIP partners that worked directly on farm to school, and 31 partners worked on school-based ag. So like you were seeing with the school-based gardens, things like that. On our webpage, how we support that here, we have a site here that just kind of gives the basics, what it is, everything that we've already talked about, and then it gives some guidelines on how to get started. And the most important person to know in your area for working with SHIP is who is your local SHIP coordinator. So here is a way to find out, here, for example, so some counties, like Anoka County, they're large enough, they are their own SHIP grantee. Up in Healthy Northland, that's a combination of multiple counties, and then you can see who the coordinator is. So from a SHIP standpoint, how we're supporting farm to school in light of COVID, I mean, we're really following the lead of our SHIP coordinators and our local public health staff. Before this call, I reached out to a couple of SHIP partners that I know had worked on farm to school efforts, and what I'm getting is it seems that those that already have the established connections are likely going to keep doing farm to school efforts. A lot of our local public health staff that work on SHIP have been reassigned to work on COVID response, and so it really is just a question of capacity. So at this point, I personally have not been contacted by farm to school concerns. We've been dealing more with things like rural grocery issues, what's happening with farmers markets. I think we will start getting more contacts on farm to school related concerns as we get closer to the school year. But we're really just trying to be flexible. We have sort of a financial guidance of how we can support the work, and in other things we are being a bit more flexible to support the response to COVID. For instance, Deb had mentioned with all the packing of meals, there's a need now for boxes and bags, and those are things like in the setting of food shelves that have switched to doing similar type of food distribution. We have said, yes, this is an allowable expense. So from a SHIP standpoint, we're just doing our best to stay responsive and understand that capacity may be limited, and we want to be supportive as possible. So that's, I don't have as many amazing updates as the rest of you, but that is the overview of how SHIP supports farm to school. So I'm happy to take questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Yeah.
I'm not seeing any questions. Any questions from anybody at this time? Sadie, will there be any new incentives for schools to source local come fall?
Incentives. Well, from a SHIP standpoint, we don't really give incentives. Our funding more so supports the staff time. And we also work as a convener, so we're happy to figure out if there are other partners that might be working on incentives. We'll gladly work on bringing that together, but that's not how SHIP funds are generally used.
Helen piped in to say that MDA will talk about that too. So, yep.
That sounds good. That's the type of partnership we're talking about.
Yeah, partnership in action. Nice work,
Yeah,
everybody.
right there. Thanks.
Yeah, and maybe that's a nice transition. Unless there are more questions.
Yeah, and I will say I've noticed there are a number of our SHIP partners on this call that do farm to school that can likely talk to it even better than I can. But yeah, from a SHIP standpoint, we're just waiting to see what's coming up.
All right. Well, thank you, Sadie. Next, my colleagues from the Department of Agriculture are joining us to share information around Minnesota Ag in the Classroom and the Farm to School Reimbursement Grant. Sue Knott is an education specialist with the Minnesota Agriculture in the Classroom program. Minnesota Ag in the Classroom empowers K through 12 educators to integrate agriculture into science, social studies, English, language, arts, and health nutrition curriculum. So with that, Sue, I'll hand it over to you. Sue?
Oh no, I can't hear anybody.
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, I accidentally muted everyone, but now you're back. So I want to just take a couple minutes and, oh no. I'm trying to show my slideshow, but I can't get to the button. I just wanted to tell you about our Minnesota Agriculture in the Classroom program. I see some familiar faces on the call, but I just wanted to share we're part of the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And when Grace showed the image about farm to school at the very beginning, it had the three major components: procurement, school gardens, and education. We, our Minnesota Ag in the Classroom program really tries to address that that education component. So you can see on my slide that our vision is that agriculture is valued by all, and we really try to work with K through 12 students, their teachers, their families, and weave agriculture into science, social studies, language arts, math, health and nutrition curricula that, you know, we're required by the state to help them meet specific goals in those areas, and we think agriculture can be a really great way to do that. And if that happens, if that is woven, if agriculture is woven in, we hope that students will become agriculturally literate, and you can kind of read the definition there, and maybe you're not quite as excited about it as the girl with the hands that has been working in a garden, but we think it's really valuable and really exciting if everybody has a little insight into how food is grown in our state and how it gets to them. So our website is mn.agclassroom.org. I'm going to go there in just a second. I wasn't able to link, or the links weren't working when I tried to practice this. So we have a curriculum matrix, which is a searchable database of lesson plans and resources that are all agriculturally themed, but connected to academic standards in those core curricular areas. So I was a teacher for about 10 years, and I feel like this searchable database addresses two challenges that most teachers have. They never have enough time, and they never have enough money. And this matrix is really fast and easy to use, and it's free to any educator or anyone who wants to use it. In addition to that, we have some printed resources. Our Ag Mag magazine series has been around since 1986, so 34 years we've been able to give magazines to any educator or any person who wants them for free. And we also have our school garden guide, which you know, you guys were talking about the nuts and bolts of being safe in a garden and growing food. This is more of a guide for educators to use a school garden space or a growing area as a learning laboratory for science and social studies and language arts lessons. We created this guide in 2013, so it's already 7 years old. So we're kind of at a place where we want to reinvent this and get ideas of what's needed. So we'll probably wait until COVID is in our rearview mirror, but we do have some ideas in the works, and if any of you have any insight of what a new school garden guide designed for educators might look like, we'd love to hear that. We also have some videos. One of my favorites is Follow Your Food, that follows carrots from Open Hands Farm in Northfield all the way to Loring Elementary, part of the Minneapolis Public Schools. That's a really fun one. And in this e-learning area, we started a blog that highlights different activities that families can do at home and potentially teachers can maybe suggest to their students. So I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint, which did not work as well as I wanted, and try to share our website so I can just show you where you can find some of these tools or how to use this. Okay, hold on. All right, here we go. So this is mn.agclassroom.org, and the resources the matrix and some of the other resources I just talked about can be found under Educator Center. So the curriculum matrix, that's what I was talking about, the database of lesson plans and additional resources. So let's say you wanted to do something on like food miles. How far does food travel before we can eat it? So that's going to be my keyword. I'm going to search. You can search by keyword, grade level, subject area. Those are kind of the three main ones. So you can see here are the lesson plans that have the keyword food miles in them. Let's say that I was working with, like some sixth graders. So I wanted to do a middle school area, and I wanted it to be, so that's a grade level I selected. Sorry, I sometimes go fast through this. And then let's also say that I wanted it to be focused on, some geography. Well, actually, I'll select all of the social studies areas. Any of those will do. So then this is going to narrow down my list so that I'm just looking at one or two lessons. I don't have to look at all of them. So perfect. So food miles, Minnesota grown, that sounds just what I want. Here's a complete lesson plan that a teacher could use in their classroom, or they could get inspiration for some distance learning activities right now. So this follows food and has students calculate how many miles a local salad, so with things grown in Minnesota, would travel compared to a salad that was using ingredients from not local sources. So you can see there's, vocabulary, background information, interest approach, and then activities that a teacher would use with their students in a classroom. Now, this one isn't super great for using in our distance learning situation right now, but it could easily be adapted. We do have, if I go back up to the top, in the Educator Center, we do have a page right now designed for distance learning resources that are easily adaptable, that teachers can just share their setup, so they can just share with their students and they can do them on our own. So I have taken enough time. I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Helen at the Department of Ag, to talk about some more farm to school specific items that she is working on. Actually, I'm going to pass it to Sammy, who's going to pass it to Helen.
Okay. Yeah, so Helen joined the Minnesota Department of Agriculture as a regional marketing specialist at the end of 2019 to start a newly created position focused on supporting farm to school across Minnesota and how to help food producers and their communities thrive in regional wholesale markets. So Helen, it's your turn.
Here we go. Okay. Is my screen still being shared?
Nope, it's just you right now.
It's just me. Okay. Hi, everyone. Helen Schnoes, happy to join you. And I'll be quick because I know that there's some questions, and I really appreciate everyone coming together today. It's nice to kind of reconnect after everything we've been going through the last month or so. So just to wrap up some resources from the Department of Ag. First, I want to just bring your attention, if you haven't seen it already, we have a frequently updated resource about COVID-19 in food and agriculture on the Department of Ag website. And this is really meant to be a one-stop shop for guidance and other resources, and it is being updated frequently. We also have a COVID-specific email list that kind of is screened daily, and questions go to wherever they're best answered. So you don't need to know which program or which staff member to reach out to if it's a food and ag COVID question. Here's a summary of the different sorts of content on that page. And, it's kind of across the gamut of food and ag. So if something, resonates with that, please do follow up with that website and those resources.
Helen, are you showing a screen right now?
Oh, I am. Was it not showing?
I wasn't seeing anything.
Oh, no. Let's see. There. I had it showing before, I think. Is that better?
Yes, I see it now. Hopefully everybody else
Okay.
does. Yep.
You know, here we go. I'm the one to mess up the most.
No, no, no. You're good.
Thanks, Connie. So I'm Helen Schnow's Regional Marketing Specialist with MDA. And here you can see what that COVID resource looks like on our website, and just calling out the MDA responds at state.mn.us as our kind of across the board COVID response email to be screened and kind of directed as best suited. This screen shows the range of resources on that, and I made this list for the last local foods college I presented on, and I know that our resources have been developed even since then, so please look to that as it serves your needs. I am here to just give an update about our AGRI Farm to School grant. I know there's been some questions already. This grant we've had for a number of years, and it's been principally focused on both planning for farm to school, so kind of getting your ducks in a row internally to figure out how you want to build a farm to school program. As Grace said, there's no one right way to do it, and it's all about what your community and interests and needs are and resources. But we've also had an equipment grant that has allowed for kitchen improvement so that when you receive that local food, it can be best used in your school kitchen facility. In the last budget session of the legislature, 2019, there was a lot of advocacy around farm to school and how to provide other incentives to support local purchasing by schools. I think Deb helped us understand today there's a lot of regulations and funding patterns that can make buying that local food a bit challenging, especially when you're just getting started with it. So there was actually a change to the budget rider that informs our farm to school grant, to grant the Commissioner of Agriculture the ability to use these grant funds to support reimbursement of local food purchases. So there's kind of different proposals brought to the legislature, but the final budget we received is kind of just nesting that new ability to reimburse within the existing farm to school grant program. So what we had been talking about at the department then was looking to create a pilot incentive program for fiscal year 2021, which starts in July of this year. As you can see by this newsletter post from our colleagues with Extension to the statewide Farm to School newsletter group, on March 12th, we provided an update on the Farm to School pilot. So March 12th is probably resonating as COVID-19 was happening, and so it feels like kind of a different world. We have had the chance to meet again as a grant team internally and want to do what we can to maintain the projected launch schedule for this grant. In the update, we said we're aiming for late spring, so funds could be utilized in the next school year. But as with everything these days, you know, work schedules and everything has gotten shaken up. So we're currently committed to doing what we can to try to keep to that, but just need to acknowledge and recognize, I think all of our lives are a bit different now than what they looked like on March 12th when we were doing some plannings. But it is something we are excited about, and I think it could be, you know, we're really focused on it being a pilot. So it's an experiment and a starting point to hopefully build on and strengthen and learn from after this initial push. So that's all I can say right now. A lot of details are still internal as we're working them out, but we did want to just kind of give that update since we provided the update previously before the pandemic really overwhelmed us all. Just a note that we also have been seeing a lot of interest in direct to consumer, and so we do have a lot of resources, both guidance and our Minnesota Grown program that I just always like to call out. And I will mention that the wholesale directory that we have with Minnesota Grown, we're in the process of updating that kind of behind the scenes right now, so that as we have this new farm to school grant, and just to better support farm to school and wholesale local food relationships more broadly. That resource can be more dynamic to serve food service directors as well as the farmers wanting to make those wholesale market connections. So that's a resource that we know kind of has opportunity to be strengthened, and we're excited to be kind of starting down that path as we look to some of these new opportunities. So thank you so much. I know there's been a lot of questions, and I really appreciate everyone coming together because we've been doing so much reacting. It's nice to also hold space and look ahead together and see what our connections can be when we're stronger kind of as one Minnesota. So any immediate questions, or I can throw it to Sammy and Connie.
Was the, someone came through earlier and was asking about a 4-cent incentive that was going to be added to local food menu purchases for schools. Is that part of what you just described with the pilot? Was that the component?
So really, all the direction that we have from the legislature to shape a reimbursement pilot incentive for farm to school is a clause that says, and at the commissioner's discretion, reimbursements for farm to school or local food purchases, something along those lines. Okay. So that really leads us as agency staff the responsibility of setting the entire scope. There's a lot of existing programs we're looking at, including Michigan has a 10 cents a meal program. Oregon has kind of evolved their program in a really cool way over the years, but also, you know, Minnesota needs to serve what's best for Minnesota. All that we know is that we have a pot of $374,000, 6 figures. I get my decimal points wrong and it's really bad. My scales, but the same amount we had for the last farm to school grant to do this. It's just we can experiment, and so that's what we had been hoping to do. So the scope of how that reimbursement is structured and how it corresponds to other parts of a budget or procurement strategy, we've not finalized.
Good.
So you do. So you don't have schools picked out for the pilot yet, or do you?
Nope. We're still drafting what the RFA should look like and plan to, at least at this point, have it be a competitive application process, but with a key focus on ensuring broad opportunity across geography, school size, and having some considerations about how a lot of schools can participate in this pilot year. So we'll be looking at who applies to kind of make the determination of who can participate. But it's all being defined now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any additional questions from anyone? I know, Brian, you said you had a longer question you wanted to pose. This might be a good time. And I think you can unmute yourself. Maybe Brian's not with us anymore. All right. Any other questions from anyone? Oh, sorry, Brian just said, hi, I disconnected. Are you referring to me? Yes, Brian Emanuel, I'm referring to you. I think you're able to unmute yourself, Brian, if you wanted to ask your question. Totally get it with the hot spots in the rural area. Yep, we'll be patient, just as we talked about, tech can be tough. So.
Hi, can you hear me?
Ken, yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, sorry. I was gonna just write it in the chat, but I can speak too if that works.
Go for it.
Okay, well, so I'm an AmeriCorps volunteer and I'm working with a tribal school. And in what I wrote, I also prefaced with this whole thing, like anything I share, any thoughts I share, like aren't intended to represent the tribe stance on anything. I'm just trying to help. So there are some kind of thoughts that have been running through my mind this whole time. And I'm really glad someone brought up reimbursement on purchasing local foods, because that does help address really the kind of the essence of the issue here. I've seen economic benefits and supporting local farmers listed as intended outcomes on several documents for procuring local foods. And here on this reservation, we're making really good progress on a lot of agricultural endeavors, but we still would need to procure most local food from outside the boundaries of the reservation. And so with that being the case, it feels like economic benefits aren't really applicable to many tribes. And the state and national farm to school grants I've seen, they don't provide funding for procurement, and they say, you know, we want you to create a sustainable system. That's why we're not providing funding for this. But if a tribe doesn't receive the same, you know, boons to their economy, is that approach really equitable? Really, like, considering the economic impact caused by COVID-19, which has just crippled a lot of industries, including the gaming industry, it feels like securing funding for procurement is unrealistic. And as things are currently, it feels like even to succeed in securing that funding, it would, more than anything, it would be me imposing my perspective, you know, on European food systems, support these farms, and really contributing as a colonizer if there isn't as much incentive. So that was really the essence, I guess, of the question.
I think those are really important considerations to be having, and I think essential to ongoing conversations of engagement and consultation and mutual support across farm to school and other endeavors now and beyond COVID. Maybe one more immediate opportunity, if you want to send me your information, Brian, the National Farm to School Network has redirected an existing grant to be in response to COVID to support immediate needs right now. And they are targeting that support most intentionally with tribal nations and Native-led organizations. And there's a number of opportunities that that could serve. And so we've been sending that out through our tribal liaisons at the state that are working on food security. But Stephanie just listed it, but if you want to follow up to talk more about that opportunity, I think it's trying to honor some of those concerns that you articulated so well as you think about what farm to school means for the tribe you're working with. And I welcome anyone else's response to Brian. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Good, and Sadie also included some information about SHIP and their work in the chat as well.
Yeah, I can't speak with any eloquence to the work of the SHIP tribal work, but if you're interested, I can definitely get more information.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I've seen a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of really good work going on as well. It seems like procurement specifically is one of the things that's a little bit under acknowledged at times. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just that specifically sometimes is a little rough.
And I know there was a question a while back, around the time that Deb was speaking. So if Deb's still on, maybe she can contribute to the answer. But the question was around whether or not there's some opportunities to capitalize on this frozen food needs now, and whether or not there's an opportunity for farm to school or some entities to support that frozen food procurement. And I know, Steve, I think you were the one who put that question forward. So if you wanted to elaborate any more on that question, we can maybe talk about that a little too. So Steve pipes in and just says, just curious if it could give us a way to source more product from farmers and freeze it for use later. And I think I'll add to that as I was listening to this conversation. Deb, do you have any recommendations about how local producers might be able to support this food distribution work? Do you have any recommendations? You kind of mentioned how time-strapped people are, and so we want to be respectful of all of that. But if you have any suggestions where people can start, that would be helpful.
Right. And that was my first thought, is that I know it's crazy times for food service directors now, just in dealing with the COVID and the distance learning and the non-traditional food service, but also they're needing to prepare for next school year, and developing budgets for next school year, and planning menus for next school year. So I think that it might be a tough reach to contact food service directors now about farm to school issues. However, I know that there are, I think, 3 food service directors in your audience right now. And I think Minneapolis was there. I can't remember who else, but if somebody else who is a food service operator, I think they'd be better positioned to speak to it than I would, because what I do know is that there is a lot of variables and a lot of variances between the districts right now. Some of them have time, some of them don't. Some of them have laid off many of their food service staff, so they are doing most of the work themselves. Some are looking for ways for their staff to find work to do. So does anybody have a list of, Sammy, can you look through the list and see if there's some food service directors that might want to respond?
Yeah, I don't know if Kate wants to respond from Minneapolis, or Vicky from Lewiston, Altura. I know Liz from up north is on. Renee, we might have some. Anybody want to respond to Steve?
I can chime in. This is Kate with Minneapolis Public Schools. Not a food service director, but I'm our district's farm to school coordinator, and I would really, just echo what Deb said about how busy it is right now. And it's really, at least in our district, all hands on deck as we figure out how to get as many meals or food boxes out to children as we can. We ironically just had a meeting this morning internally to discuss farm to school for the summer and the fall, very big picture. And there's still so much uncertainty about what exactly our operations will look like. And we're kind of trying to play through different versions based on the farm to school items we're planning to purchase, and how we might be able to creatively use those in our food service program in different ways. But I would say, generally, I think for a lot of districts right now, it's really unclear what exactly the next few months will hold, and how our food service operations will be changing based on community need and staff demand, and what the upcoming school year holds.
Thank you, Kate. Anybody else want to chime in?
So Nikki says, is there room for farm to school during this pandemic, or are efforts in general really on hold until the next school year?
You know, this is Deb. I have real concerns about the capacity of food service directors to take on or even continue or add to another initiative. I know that I don't mean to speak in general terms because there might be certain instances, but I know that even in our case where, you know, we can, our primary business is conducting compliance and monitoring reviews, and they were stopped mid-March, and I am very hesitant to even contact food service operators, school food service directors to say, hey, let's finish out your review, let's close it up. I'm just not going to do that. I tread very carefully, and we do reach out, but we go very softly and gauge capacity first. And if I get a sense that don't bother me, I'm too busy, I don't have time, then I'll back off real quickly. So gauging capacity for each individual district would be kind of critical, and do it in a very diplomatic and soft way. But I've got concerns about it might not be, the timing might not be right, but maybe for some schools, if you've already developed a relationship with some of the schools, you know, you might certainly check into that. Sammy, what are your thoughts? Anything? Or Megan?
Yeah, exactly that, and kind of what Sadie was already talking about earlier, that if those schools have already developed those relationships with their local producers and growers, that they are more likely to continue those relationships even in these times. So I think there's still opportunity to purchase your local foods and serve them, even in your summer programming, as I mean, school nutrition directors are able to do that. But any others want to chime in? I know Vicki said she was having a hard time with audio. She'd like to chime in, but she can't get her audio to work. So,
hi, this is Jamie Anderson with Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. And hi, so I'm the assistant director with PLSAS, and you know, farm to school is really important to a lot of us. I think it's one of those things that the easier that producers and growers and farmers can make the produce for directors to purchase, the more likely that it will be able to happen. So, you know, we have to have a vegetable and a fruit component in the meals that we're serving right now, and will need to in the future. So thinking about the kinds of things that are easy for us, that are grab and go, you know, if we have to continue some sort of a modified food service coming up in the fall, things that are easy for us to grab and go, to put in bags, those are the kinds of things that are going to be really valuable for us. And, you know, we would love to continue supporting our local growers. So any way that there can be some compromises or some communication on some of those items would be awesome, coming from a food service director perspective.
thanks, Jamie. Also, Vicki wrote in that she's already planning for next year, like many others. She still plans to work and make local purchases and work on farm to school activities. And over the summer, she'll procure fresh vegetables that they will freeze, and they have maybe in the storage to do that. I know that kind of addresses what Steve was asking before. And she plans to continue her efforts in moving farm to school forward at Lewiston Altura.
Hi, it's Liz. I'm not at Proctor Schools anymore. I'm a nutrition educator for Fond du Lac. But I am supporting the Ojibwe School and their farm to school effort. And I think whatever the farmers can do to make it, like you said, easier, a lot of the other ones, things that are going to be maybe grab and go, because I don't see anything changing anytime soon from what I'm hearing from my friends, that even summer food service, the way it's going, they're going to continue doing this. And is that what I'm hearing, Deb? Can they continue to do summer food service now into the summer? And then what's going to happen in the fall? Is it going to be a similar meal plan?
You know, you just don't know. You have to, we learn new things every few days. And much of it is driven by USDA on what the regulations allow, and much of it is driven by Governor Walz and what he's wanting for the whole state. So yeah, I've heard a lot of talk and scuttlebutt about, you know, what do we do after May 31st or June 1st, but we have not gotten any written directive, and until it's written on paper, it's not in effect.
Sure.
Thank you, Jamie, for sharing your comments. They were really, really helpful. Very well said.
We've got a question about considerations of delaying MDA reimbursement for pilot RFP due to challenges of adding more nutrition directors right now with COVID. Is that something, Helen, you can address?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. And I appreciate that Deb just said until something's written, nothing's official. And that's kind of where we are on developing that grant. I'll say the last time we met to discuss it was April 8th. And that's when we decided try to keep on track as much as we can to honor all the energy that went into leading to that grant from the community and the interest and demand that we heard. That said, as also Deb just said, you're very wise, Deb, we're learning more every few days. And so I think if there are concerns, those would be really helpful to share with me, share with the department, because I think we're all in a moment where we can't plan too far ahead. And so if there's a need to think alternatively, we want to hear those voices from the community. So we're honoring kind of the reality of what we're all in during this pandemic. Do you want to add anything, Sammy, to how I phrase that?
No, that was great. Thank you.
I just want to draw attention to, I want to promote our local ship staff. You can see Jamie posted in the side chat, and I responded to Steve's question. Don't forget that they are a resource there for you. But also, they might be really busy with COVID, so.
I know that it's 4:30, and if people have to jump off, you know, and go to other things, please do. There are just a few extra questions, so if our experts are willing to stick around for me a couple more minutes to address some of those, we won't go too long. But there was a concern about food prep and whether or not for those grab and goes, whether or not that's still something that can be done. Any insight on food prep, chopping food?
Are they thinking that there's a higher risk of spreading the disease via food, or?
Yeah, her question is for the grab and go to make easy for food service. No cutting of vegetables is allowed though, correct?
Oh, I haven't heard that.
Okay.
In fact, we just had in the webinar just prior to this, the Department of Health was on talking about food preparation, and she said that food is just not a good vehicle for transmitting, but that it was, you know, breathing and air, and so person to person contact rather than food as a vehicle for transmitting.
Just wanted to clarify, I'm the one that wrote that question. Someone, ready? Can you hear me?
You're cutting in and out, Marilyn.
Okay, I can type it in.
Okay.
While Marilyn's typing, this is Grace. I was just going to hop into some of the things that I was hearing, and also call attention to Fallon Ryan's note that working with commercial kitchens and storage facilities across the state could be a good way to source products for extended use. Sprout, Minnesota, and the Good Acre have capacity to do this. This is a challenging time, and also a time for creativity and innovation. And again, realizing with ship coordinators, with all these types of partners, there's a lot of opportunity to still connect and find creative solutions, while also realizing everyone is very busy in figuring out what things look like right now. I know for the communities that we've been working with, it just echoes that nutrition directors have their hands full figuring things out right now, and more information is always coming. But that said, it's also very much, like was also said, case by case basis. If this was already a priority for them or an interest for them, many pieces are already in place. So it doesn't need to prevent anyone from doing it, although it is certainly a challenging time. And I think Hannah Colby, who we worked with in Aiken County for some of this, speaks to this well. I'd encourage her to speak up if she'd like. She shared a good example in the chat.
And Marilyn she clarified that she was talking about whether or not it's okay for growers to prepare chopping and cutting the produce in response to making it easier for food directors to use their food. So I think she just wanted to make sure that she was able as a grower to prep the food for food directors.
Tammy, do you have an answer for that one?
Well, I could. Otherwise, I know Annalisa is on, and I don't know if she wants to. Or Natalie, both of them, this is kind of their expertise area. So I don't know if they would want to address it directly or not first.
Yeah, this is Annalisa. I can just say real briefly, yeah, no, there's nothing to prevent a grower from doing any of that limited processing in terms of, the school buyer in this instance wouldn't have any, there wouldn't be anything against that there. If you do anything beyond a limited processing, so that's just readying for market, just basic presentation. If you get into more processing where you're adding off-farm products, then you might have to get a license. But there's nothing in the state food code that I'm aware of that would indicate that you couldn't just do that basic processing.
Thanks, Annalisa.
All right. Anything else from anyone?
I know that we're over time, so I just wanted to share that if any folks want to continue this conversation, we will be having another, what we call it, an informal farm to school check-in. So we invite you all to join us on that call. It's happening on May 14th from 2 to 3:30. And I don't know if somebody else can share that link or not, but you can also write in, say that you're interested, and we can take your name and make sure you get the information. But we plan to continue this conversation on May 14th again at 2 to 3:30.
Excellent. All right, so with that, we will save the chat. So there was a lot of notes that came through there, and we will, we can share that with anyone who sends a message to us or wants to know. And with that, I think I'll get to the last screens here. Whoops, didn't want to do that. Here we go. We have one more session on our schedule. It's about fostering inclusive cultures at farmers markets. It should be a very good discussion about addressing some of the issues that people have seen, and continuing to develop a One Minnesota aspect around our farmers markets. We will have this session today posted on our Facebook, and you can tweet it out as well. And these are places where you can access this and share this information. I think we had an excellent session of great input, so feel free to share. And this is our website, so feel free to go back, check it out, and share with others who might need this information. And I'll leave that at that. I'll also put my email in the chat box, so anyone who wants to follow up with me directly can do so. And with that, thank you very much to our presenters and for our audience for the great questions, great dialogue.
Yeah, thank you, Connie. Thanks, everyone.